Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is the fucking craziest game I've ever played. We got 75 playable characters, over 100 stages, over 800 original music tracks, and this Super Smash Bros. Game has officially reached parody levels of content. It's got Mario vs. Solid Snake vs. Sonic vs. Pac-Man vs. Cloud, Simon Belmont, Ryu, Bayonetta, Mega Man, Ridley, the fucking Joker got announced at the Game Awards, all this fucking dumbass shit, and we still have 4 more unannounced DLC characters. Like, it's fucking nonsense! Sakuria has finally delivered on one of the most batshit crazy Super Smash Bros. Games to date, but apparently that's not good enough. You see, once you get past all the excitement and joy that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate provides, there's this dirty underbelly of ungrateful motherfuckers who still can't play their favorite, incredibly niche roster pick. It's like Sakurai finally got around to putting in King K. Rool, Ridley, and all the long-time requested characters, but oh no, apparently he's lazy because Waluigi isn't in the game. Like, fuck off. Fuck you! You see, the sad thing about Super Smash Bros. Is that Sakurai will continue to pour his heart and soul into this fucking game and no one's ever happy. Everyone's always upset for some reason. Apparently, there's never enough characters in this game. I mean, sure, this might be the craziest character roster in any video game that's ever existed, but why isn't my favorite character in? Why is my favorite character an assist trophy? Why hasn't this incredibly niche character for some irrelevant ass game not in Super Smash Bros? Why did my favorite character only get a Mii outfit? I mean, it doesn't even matter how big this game gets. As long as Super Smash Bros. Continues to exist as a series, there will always be some retard who's upset because fucking Goku isn't in the game. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand where everyone's coming from. I've been playing every Super Smash Bros. Game since the original game came out on the Nintendo 64. I'm accustomed to the pre-release hype, all the fan roster speculation, the excitement, the fake leaks, the disappointment. Motherfucker, I was that dumbass kid on GameFAQs. I lived in the fucking Smash Bros. Dojo, son. I've been there for Melee, I've been there for Brawl, I've been there for Smash 4, and now I'm here for Ultimate. But at this point, everyone is here. Anyone worth putting into the game is in the fucking game. With the current roster being this large, how can you still not be happy? It's like people have forgotten that some characters just don't deserve to be playable in Super Smash Bros. And now that all the important characters have made it in, all the current roster speculation for the DLC has devolved into these D-tier trash character picks that frankly don't deserve a fucking Mii outfit. Now, I know there's a lot of fans out there that want all sorts of crazy characters in Super Smash Bros, but you have to realize that there has to be some fucking standards here. For starters, you can't just pick your favorite video game character and say they deserve to be in Super Smash Bros, alright? It's not that simple. If you want someone in Super Smash Bros, you have to back up your favorite character picks with objective facts, like what would their moveset be? If they can even have a moveset, would it be unique? Would their moveset represent their in-game abilities in their respective games? Is your character pick a representative of a multi-hit series? Is your character pick even popular enough to warrant being in Super Smash Bros? Do they have any history with Nintendo? Is your character iconic? Would it even be fun to play as your character? These are the questions that anyone should ask whenever someone wants a dumbass character in Super Smash Bros. Because if someone's character pick is bad, chances are they'll have some pretty terrible answers to most of these questions. Now, despite these questions usually sorting out the garbage, that still doesn't mean that D-tier trash characters don't get into Super Smash Bros. Because honestly, they get in all the fucking time. But it's important to distinguish between the bad and the good. Everyone sort of has their own mentality that comes with what characters deserve to be in Super Smash Bros. But for me personally, each character in the game can be distilled from a very specific design philosophy that dates back to the original Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo 64. Obviously, there's a wide variety of characters in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but I'd argue that the best characters in the game are the ones that follow a very specific set of criteria. So for starters, the most important thing about a great Super Smash Bros. Character is that they have some sort of legacy. Typically, they're a character that's exclusively Nintendo related and a representative of a multi-hit series of games. They're also a character that has a lot of potential for their moveset. Ideally, Super Smash Bros. Characters should have a wealth of abilities that can be easily reincorporated into the game, and the more abilities that are directly pulled from the respective franchise, the better. Also, these abilities should result in a character that is objectively unique. For example, some of the best Super Smash Bros. Characters that have been created over the years will always bring something new to the roster. These are characters like Kirby, Zelda, Villager, Inkling, Rosalina, Pikachu, Link, Peach, and pretty much any character that's currently in Super Smash Bros. That has no problems whatsoever. These are characters that are solely related to Nintendo, that are obvious fan favorites for the series, that all have perfect movesets related to their in-game abilities. Now, in a perfect world, every character in Super Smash Bros. Would follow the same exact criteria. But of course, there are some exceptions to the rules, and Sakurai has broken them constantly throughout the years. One of the first exceptions to the rules is what I would like to refer to as a lack of moveset potential. Aka, you can bullshit a moveset if it's worth it. This exception refers to legacy characters that simply can't have a moveset that represents their in-game abilities. One of the most obvious examples of this exception is with Fox and Captain Falcon, since most of their abilities in their respective games is based off of their vehicles. This means that most of their famous in-game abilities aren't based off of the characters themselves, which is a major problem because you obviously can't have Fox flying in his R-Wing 24/7. Because of this issue, Sakurai created a completely unique moveset based off of their character traits instead. For example, Fox is mostly famous for using his R-Wing, so most of his kit is based off of using futuristic space technology like his blaster and his reflector. On the other hand, Captain Falcon is most famous for racing at incredibly high speeds, so he was given incredibly fast movement and attacks that match his physique and demeanor. Ideally, these characters should both have movesets that are represented off of their in-game abilities, but since they lack moveset potential, Sakurai basically had to make some shit up. Of course, since these characters have a massive legacy, it's still worth bullshitting a moveset because they're both the main characters of a legacy Nintendo series. The second exception to the rules are what I would like to refer to as the clone characters. Aka, the Sakurai branded Echo Fighters. Aka, the clone characters are officially called something now, so now everyone likes them. Ideally, the clone characters would have their own unique moveset based off their respective franchises, but due to development constraints, these characters lack a unique moveset that truly represents them. Clones have been around since the original Super Smash Bros., but they started to become more popular in Super Smash Bros. Melee, most notably Ganondorf and Falco. Since Ganondorf's inception to the series, he's always been a clone of Captain Falcon, which is a shame because Captain Falcon already has a made-up moveset to begin with. Of course, they tweaked his properties to be slower and more of a heavy hitter, but as he currently stands, a lot of his abilities don't represent his in-game abilities from The Legend of Zelda. You see, this is a trade-off between having a wholly unique character and having their inclusion at all, since the more unique a character is, the longer it'll take to develop. Still, despite his status as a clone character, Ganondorf is the main villain of The Legend of Zelda, so having the inclusion of Ganondorf was worth the cost of not having a wholly unique moveset, since he's an incredibly popular Nintendo character. While each installment has made Ganondorf more unique over time, his initial clone status has always limited the potential to have a completely unique moveset, which is why Ganondorf has always been an imperfect character. As fun as he is to play at times, there was always that hidden potential that was never truly realized. Now, for other clone characters, sometimes their in-game abilities are just so similar to another character that it's better to use less resources so you can include them. These are clones like Falco, Pichu, Wolf, Daisy, and Fire Emblem. Similar to Ganondorf, Sakurai tends to keep these characters interesting by sometimes changing their movement and attack properties to warrant the inclusion. However, the difference with these clones is that it isn't worth the time to create a brand new moveset because there really isn't that much to work with. For example, the Link clones are more similar to Ganondorf since they have a ton of untapped potential for their moveset, while the Fire Emblem clones are just character with sword. As a result, these kinds of clone characters are sort of like 2 or 3 slightly different versions of the same character, which can be kind of boring. Aka, Fire Emblem. Still, the end result is entirely worth it, since it allows for more representation on the roster, despite how bloated it might be at times. This is most likely why Sakurai has started to embrace the Echo Fighters for this recent installment, because you can include a ton of characters that everyone loves without doing too much work. The clone characters are essentially a trade-off between an increase in representation with a decrease in having more fully original characters. Now, there's also a third exception to the rules, and this is what I would like to refer to as the legacy exception. Aka, characters no one really asked for, but Sakurai put them in anyways because fuck you. The legacy exception is essentially the inclusion of a Nintendo character that's not very popular, but their inclusion allows for a completely unique moveset that wouldn't exist otherwise. One of the most famous examples of the legacy exception would probably be the Ice Climbers, since their inclusion allows you to play as two different characters at once. Other examples of the legacy exception are characters like Corrin, whose origin was from a game that wasn't even released when they were announced, or most recently Piranha Plant, who was such a basic Mario enemy that its inclusion was completely unexpected. The legacy exception can also be applied to characters that have some sort of historical significance, like Pit, Mr. Game & Watch, and Rob. This is used for characters that meet the ideally perfect criteria for a Super Smash Bros. Character, but are usually so fucking irrelevant that they wouldn't have gotten it otherwise. To sum up the legacy exception, it's essentially used for characters that are fucking weird that no one really wanted, but their moveset is usually unique, and after they're announced, everyone just accepts that they're cool characters and doesn't give a shit. The fourth and final exception to the rules is what I'd like to refer to as the outsider picks. Aka, the not Nintendo characters. Aka, fuck the rules, we'll do whatever we want. These are characters that fit all the criteria of a perfect Super Smash Bros. Character, besides the fact that they aren't exclusively related to Nintendo. Now, I use that specific wording for a reason, because while a lot of the outsider picks for Super Smash Bros. Aren't exclusively Nintendo characters, they do play a part in Nintendo's history. For example, Solid Snake is most famous for the Metal Gear Solid series, but the first Metal Gear games were released on the NES. Most of the classic Mega Man games have been on Nintendo consoles, the classic Castlevania games have had their home on the NES, and Pac-Man has been ported to multiple Nintendo consoles as well as Street Fighter. Bayonetta was originally on the Xbox 360 and the PS3, but she might as well be a Nintendo character at this point, with both Bayonetta 2 and 3 being exclusive to Nintendo consoles. Sonic was created by Sega as a response to the popularity of Mario, but their old school rivalry almost makes Sonic a perfect fit for the series. Even Cloud might feel like an incredibly out of place pick, but that's until you realize that a lot of the classic Final Fantasy games were originally on the NES and the Super NES. The Joker is probably one of the biggest outsider inclusions of recent memory, but honestly, if Sakurai's gonna break the rules a bit, they couldn't have picked a better character. I mean, Jesus Christ, he's the main character from a Persona game, one of the best series of games that's on the PlayStation. Hilariously enough, the Joker's inclusion isn't even breaking the rules, because Persona Q2 was released in Japan a week before his announcement at the Game Awards. So as fucked up as that sounds, the Joker has technically been on a Nintendo console. You see, while all these characters might be well known for games that weren't on Nintendo consoles, the series that they originate from has had some sort of relationship with Nintendo at some point or another, which is probably the most important aspect to the exception of outsider picks. Of course, the reason the outsider picks have become more acceptable over time is because they themselves are massively popular characters that have movesets that perfectly represent their in-game abilities. The only character that doesn't have a perfect moveset is probably Pac-Man. But of course, bullshitting a moveset for Pac-Man is perfectly fine because he's fucking Pac-Man, one of the most iconic arcade characters in the history of video games. To sum up the outsider picks, they're essentially a trade-off between including extremely popular video game characters, despite them not exclusively being related to Nintendo. Now, for the most part, you could rate the quality of every character in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate with these rules and exceptions, and every character in the game meets some of these criteria in one way or another. However, there are exceptions to the exceptions. Aka, characters that technically meet the previous criteria, but I don't think they deserve to be in the game because I fucking hate them. Now, this is entirely subjective, and some people might disagree with me, but hear me out, okay? The two characters that are in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate that I absolutely hate are Dr. Mario and Dark Pit, and I honestly think they should have been removed. After all, the whole concept of clone characters was that it was a way to increase representation without taking up too much development time. But that whole benefit is lost when the clones are literally the same character. Dr. Mario is just Mario in a doctor's outfit, and Dark Pit is just a palette swap of Pit. Now, obviously, I know that Dark Pit is technically a different character in Kid Icarus Uprising, but shut the fuck up, that's fucking Pit. Even in the context of the game, Dark Pit is literally just a clone of Pit. It's like the equivalent between having Peach and Pink Gold Peach instead of Peach and Daisy. It's like having Fox and James McCloud instead of Fox, Falco, and Wolf. It's like if they gave Bowser Jr. and all the Koopalings their own slots on the roster. You see, the reason that Dr. Mario and Dark Pit suck is because they could have had perfect representation as alternate costumes, but now they're just taking up space on the roster for absolutely no reason. Now, I understand that Dr. Mario and Dark Pit have some slightly different moves and properties to their attacks, but in my opinion, it's just not worth the inclusion. Anyways, that basically sums up my thoughts on the current roster of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. You have your ideally perfect Super Smash Bros. Characters with an amazing legacy and a moveset that incorporates their in-game abilities. You have your incredibly popular Nintendo characters that simply lack moveset potential. You have your clone characters that lack unique movesets simply due to a lack of development time. You have your other clone characters that share similar abilities to other fighters with few tweaks and changes. You have your group of weirdos that are pretty unique but lack a legacy on par with the other characters. You have your outsider picks that have an amazing legacy and moveset but aren't technically Nintendo characters. And then you have Dr. Mario and Dark Pit who fucking suck dick. Of course, the quality of the roster is entirely subjective, but for me personally, this is my own logic when it comes to determining what characters are perfect for future games in the series. Now, I know what everyone's thinking. Sam, why the fuck are you talking about this now that the game's already out? Does it really matter what characters deserve to be in Super Smash Bros? Why do you care so much? Who fucking gives a shit? Well, you have to realize that this is some dickless nerd shit. When I see Super Smash Bros. Fans blowing up social media whenever their incredibly niche roster pick isn't in the game, I think that's fucking lame. Alright, most normal people out there might see some of the obnoxious fans on social media and just move on with their day, but guess what? Not me, motherfucker! You know what happens when I see some stupid shit? I make a video about it and call those people fucking idiots, because being upset over the Super Smash Bros. Roster is some fucking dickless nerd shit, and I am a giant petty asshole. Listen, I thrive off this shit. Man, remember when Breath of the Wild was released and all those fucking dickless nerds were talking about where it fit on the Zelda timeline? I couldn't fucking believe it. I mean, it's like these dumb Zelda fans were jerking themselves off to this whole fan theory when Nintendo clearly didn't give a shit. So instead of ignoring these dummies and moving on with my life, I spent like 3 months of my free time researching the Zelda timeline. I made a 50-minute video about a thing I hate, just so I could pull together all my research into one video just to call them fucking idiots. Now, in retrospect, that was some petty nerd shit. That was not my proudest moment. It was a very mean thing to do. I was being very brutal. I was being a bully. And most importantly, I was ruining the fun for a ton of hardcore Zelda fans. And at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with having a fun fan theory about the Zelda timeline. It's just about having fun and sharing the love of the series and talking about all your crazy timeline theories. And it's hard to deny that Breath of the Wild clearly has a ton of references and connections to the other games in the series. Except, oh wait, apparently everything I said in the video was fucking true and those dickless nerds were wrong. What a surprise. What a fucking surprise. Anuma flat out said everything I said in my video verbatim. I was right. Suck my fucking dickless dick. And yeah, that might not be the fun answer, but it's the right answer. And the thing that separates me from all the other dickless nerds on the internet is that I'm a truth seeker, alright? When I'm talking about pointless video game bullshit on the internet, I'm not here to fuck around and say some stupid shit that isn't true. I'm here to have a fucking discussion about some pointless video game shit, and this is serious fucking business. Now I know what everyone's thinking. Sam, what the fuck are you talking about? What does the Zelda timeline have to do with Super Smash Bros? What the fuck is wrong with you? Well, here's the thing. That whole situation that I was talking about with The Legend of Zelda is the same shit different series. Alright, these fucking dickless nerds out here are talking about their Super Smash Bros. DLC character predictions, but they're all fucking dumb. They're all fucking stupid. And you know what? I could just write them off as retards and move on with my day, but fuck that. Fuck that shit. When you talk about the Super Smash Bros. Roster, this is the equivalent to the fucking video game Oscars. This is some serious shit. Meanwhile, you look at some of the popular character polls, and it's a fucking joke. Now, whatever, I get it. Some of these characters aren't that bad, and they can get into Super Smash Bros. Someday. But come the fuck on, like, are we even trying here? Sans from Undertale? Goku? Gino? Mac Rider? Who the fuck is Lloyd? Is this for fucking real? So if you haven't picked it up by now, this video is going to be some petty nerd shit about Super Smash Bros. The reason I'm making this video is because as long as Super Smash Bros. Continues to increase the size of the roster with every game in the series, this topic will continue to exist for all of eternity. You see, this video isn't about my Super Smash Bros. DLC character predictions that will become irrelevant in 5 months. It's about the artful approach to what makes a good character not only for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but for every Super Smash Bros. Game that will ever exist. And now that Sakuria has announced that there's going to be 5 DLC characters, the Smash fans are back at it again with all the dumb character picks. Oh man, we got some fucking stupid ass character picks for this DLC. And now that I've talked about the qualities of what makes a good Super Smash Bros. Character, I thought we should just talk about everything. So guess what? I decided to look through all the character polls, all the fan sites, all the forum discussions, and I've compiled all of my thoughts on some of the most frequently requested characters right into this video. Yes, that's right. I'm talking about all the dumb character picks in this video. Everyone isn't here. Oh man, we got Waluigi, we got Gino, we got the fucking Chorus Kids. We're gonna talk about everything. So instead of just talking about what I want for the DLC, let's talk about all the dumb character picks and see how some of the most highly requested characters in the Smash community hold up against my own rules and exceptions. All right, let's do this. Now, before we even talk about all the extremely dumb choices, let's talk about the more reasonable character picks. Aka, the assist trophies. Aka, the fucking losers who didn't make it into the game. In many ways, being an assist trophy in Super Smash Bros. Is both a blessing and a curse. For starters, it's an acknowledgement that your favorite character actually exists, but at the same time, it's also the revelation that they won't be playable. Of course, some assist trophies have eventually turned into playable characters in the future, but in the present time, assist trophies are essentially a death sentence. As far as Smash fans are concerned, assist trophies are like virtual gravestones that announce that your character isn't playable, but it's good in the sense that Sakurai had the respect to give your favorite character a proper burial. Now, there's a wide variety of assist trophies in the game, but for now, I'll mostly just focus on some of the popular fan favorites. Going down the list, one of the first popular picks that appears constantly is Crystal from Star Fox Adventures, a spin-off Star Fox game that no one really asked for. A lot of the fans want Crystal in the game not only because everyone wants to fuck her, but also because her staff has a lot of moveset potential. But honestly, I never really understood why people like her as a character. I mean, in Star Fox Adventures, she immediately gets trapped in a crystal and does jack shit throughout the entire game, and then she appears in Star Fox Assault as a part of the Star Fox team, and that's about it. Legacy-wise, she's appeared in multiple games, but her origins of being a sex object that Fox jerks off to is kind of embarrassing, and even Star Fox Assault was pretty average and not all that interesting. Now, there's a lot of stuff she could do with her staff, but I suppose that mostly comes down to making a moveset based off of Fox's abilities in Star Fox Adventure. So right off the bat, her moveset would be entirely based off of things that she was never seen doing. Like I said before, you can always bullshit a moveset if it's really necessary, but is it really worth bullshitting a moveset to add in a spin-off character from a game that most Star Fox fans found to be kind of boring? Not really. Maybe Crystal's moveset would be unique enough to get into the game through the legacy exception, but that mostly comes down to whether or not Sakurai could make something unique enough. And looking at Fox's abilities in Star Fox Adventures, I don't think it would be all that interesting. She could get into the game in the future, but she's definitely not a high priority pick for me personally. One of the next assist trophies on the list is Bomberman, which apparently a lot of people care about for some reason. I mean, legacy-wise, Bomberman is pretty cool, but I would never put him on par with Simon Belmont, or Cloud, or fucking Sonic, or any of the other third-party characters, so I don't really understand where all the hype is coming from. So to be honest, I actually did a little bit of research and looked up some of Bomberman's history with Nintendo. And not only does he have history with Nintendo, he also has history with fucking everyone. Like, look at this fucking list of games. Bomberman's a fucking slut. So moveset wise, I'm pretty sure Sakurai could pull a moveset out of this giant list of nonsense, but the question I ask is, would anyone actually give a shit? I mean, when people say they love Bomberman, do they actually love the Bomberman LAN games, or any of the spin-offs, or the arcade games, or all the mobile shit? Because when I look at this list, all I can think about is how many Bomberman games that came out that no one gave a fuck about. As someone who doesn't really care about Bomberman, is there like an Ocarina of Time equivalent to Bomberman? Because in my opinion, when people say they love Bomberman, I think what they really mean is that they love the top-down multiplayer game where you drop bombs and try to explode each other. You see, Bomberman might be disappointing as an assist trophy, but he actually serves that role incredibly well, because the one attack that he performs as an assist trophy basically represents the only thing that anyone cares about. Now, the next assist trophy that was highly requested was the beloved meme character Isaac from Golden Sun, which is a series of games that I've never heard anything about. In all seriousness, Isaac is probably one of the least offensive choices out of all the meme characters, because as a character from an RPG, the moveset potential is already there. I can imagine that there's a giant list of moves that Sakurai could pull straight from the Golden Sun games, and he'd probably be pretty interesting as a playable character. But here's the thing, Golden Sun is probably one of the nichest series of games ever. I mean, even as someone who doesn't even give a shit about Final Fantasy or Xenoblade, I knew who Cloud and Shulk were prior to their inclusions in Super Smash Bros., and I can't say the same for Isaac. The only exception would probably be Earthbound, but that's only because I was like 1 year old when that game came out, and then Ness was immediately included in the first game in the series. Meanwhile, the Golden Sun series is almost 20 years old at this point, and I've never had anyone recommend the Golden Sun games to me. I've never met anyone that highly praised any of the games in the series, and outside of Isaac being a meme character that fans want for Super Smash Bros., the Golden Sun series might as well not even fucking exist. Now, I'm sure the games are great and all, but in my opinion, I think having Isaac as a playable character in Super Smash Bros. Is just a bit extreme. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I think Isaac will get into Super Smash Bros. When the time is right. Isaac is just one of the many characters I would be fine with as long as Sakurai wants them in the game, because at the end of the day, no one really knows what they want until Sakurai pulls it off. For example, no one gave a fuck about Piranha Plant prior to their announcement, but now that they showed off footage of it, Piranha Plant looks fucking cool. So if Sakurai can make this stupid shit look cool, I'm pretty confident that Sakurai could make Isaac into a pretty great character. Still, at the same time, if Isaac continues to be an assist trophy for the next 15 years or so, I couldn't care less. Next on the list is Shadow from the Sonic series, who I think could have been a pretty easy inclusion as an Echo Fighter, but just wasn't for some reason. Now, I don't really give a shit about Shadow, but at the same time, I wouldn't be offended if Shadow was in the game either. Ideally, I'd prefer that Tails and Dr. Eggman would be included into the game first as original characters, but I can imagine that Tails would be way too similar to Sonic, and I don't really see Dr. Eggman happening unless maybe he was in the fucking Eggmobile or some shit. That's sort of the trio that I'd prefer to see first, but considering that Shadow has the same exact abilities as Sonic, I wouldn't mind him as an Echo Fighter as well. Shadow is not an extremely high priority pick for me personally, but it would be pretty cool to see some more Sonic characters in the future. One of the most exciting and disappointing assist trophies for Super Smash Bros. Fans was probably Shovel Knight. who is one of the most beloved indie game characters of recent memory. Now, while the inclusion of Shovel Knight as an assist trophy might be disappointing, you have to realize that he's an indie game character from one game that was released only a couple of years ago. The fact that Shovel Knight was included in Super Smash Bros. At all is a fucking miracle. Now, while the inclusion as an assist trophy might be disappointing, it does bring up an interesting discussion on whether or not indie game characters deserve to be playable at all, because the Smash community has requested a lot of popular indie game characters. I've seen Shantae being highly requested, I saw the main character in Hollow Knight being highly upvoted in character polls, and even some dumbass characters from Minecraft and Undertale are being voted for, which is absolutely fucking stupid. Personally, I don't think that any of these characters deserve to be playable, but if I had to pick something, I do think that Shovel Knight feels the most appropriate for Super Smash Bros. After all, Shovel Knight's abilities are all inspired by classic NES games, and Shovel Knight's been incredibly successful on Nintendo consoles. I mean, for the love of God, he's even got a fucking amiibo. So right off the bat, he's a pretty good fit for Nintendo, and Nintendo clearly loves the game, but the only issue with Shovel Knight and most of his indie game colleagues is that they're all one-trick ponies. In the grand scheme of things, most indie game characters originate from one-hit wonders, and that's a very important distinction to make when we're talking about Super Smash Bros. I mean, sure, people love Shovel Knight right now, but will fans still care about him 10 years from now? Will Shovel Knight continue as a series but get progressively worse as time goes on? Is Yacht Club even planning on making a second Shovel Knight game? Well, the answer is that we don't know. Shovel Knight could be a one-hit wonder, it could be a multi-hit series that lasts for 20 years, Yacht Club could go completely out of business and the series could be lost forever. The fact of the matter is that the entire legacy of Shovel Knight is a complete fucking gamble. And when you have all these amazing guest characters that could be in Super Smash Bros., why is Shovel Knight even a consideration? Like, you think the release of one indie game that's only 5 years old is on par with the entire Final Fantasy series, or Street Fighter, or Metal Gear, or Sonic, or Mega Man, or Pac-Man, or Persona, or Bayonetta? Now, don't get me wrong, Shovel Knight is a really good game, but until the series has stood the test of time, I don't think Shovel Knight deserves to be a playable character. Hilariously enough, out of all the indie game characters I found fans talking about, Shantae was probably the only indie game character that was from a series of games, and even then, I don't see her becoming playable anytime soon, let alone becoming an assist trophy. Moving down the list, another long-time, highly requested character that's an assist trophy is Ashley from the WarioWare series. This is one of the many examples of a character that's highly requested, despite the fact that they have nothing going for them. Now, don't get me wrong, I love all the WarioWare games, and Ashley is definitely one of my favorite characters in the series, but let's stop pretending that she has any potential to be a good Super Smash Bros. Character. I mean, right off the bat, what's her moveset? Fucked if I know! She could probably have a B up move where she flies on a broom and maybe she could cast a spell with B or something, but that's fucking it! I mean, Jesus Christ, if you compiled all the cutscenes featuring Ashley from every single WarioWare game, you might have 5 minutes at best. There's just nothing to fucking work with. Sure, Sakurai could bullshit a moveset to include Ashley, but why would he do that? It's fucking Ashley from WarioWare. It's like the equivalent of people wanting Mana or Jimmy T. Like, it's just fucking ridiculous. We got all these amazing characters in Super Smash Bros, and there's people out here thinking that 9V is just as iconic. Like, shut the fuck up. The next meme character that's an assist trophy is Waluigi, who originated from Mario Tennis. Waluigi is the perfect example of what I would like to refer to as fill-in characters. These kinds of characters are essentially C-tier trash characters that don't deserve to be in Super Smash Bros. But since the more popular characters in their respective franchises have made it into the game already, these characters are being requested to fill in the roster. These are characters like Toad, Dixie Kong, Slippy, Birdo, King Boo, Bandana Waddle Dee, and basically any kind of character that would be put into the game because everyone else who's more important has already made it in. For example, the only reason fans are requesting Bandana Waddle Dee is because Kirby, Meta Knight, and King Dedede have already been included. So now fans are requesting the least popular of the four simply because they want to play as more Kirby characters. Of course, if King Dedede wasn't in the game, Bandana Waddle Dee wouldn't even be in the fucking discussion. Everyone would be screaming about King Dedede. King Dedede would be at the top of all the character polls. No one would give a shit about Bandana Waddle Dee. But now that Meta Knight and King Dedede were included in Brawl, now it's Waddle Dee's turn. And guess what? It's the same shit with Waluigi. We got Mario, Luigi, Peach, Bowser, Wario, Rosalina, Bowser Jr., and Daisy. So now it's Waluigi's turn, despite the fact that he sucks dick as a character pick, and if any of these characters weren't in Super Smash Bros., Waluigi wouldn't even be in the fucking discussion. I swear to God, if you could add in Waluigi by removing one of these characters, you wouldn't fucking do it. Because Waluigi fucking sucks dick, and you know it. He has absolutely no moveset potential and a shit legacy at best. I mean, you could say the same thing about Daisy, but at least she's been in a Super Mario game. At least she's an actual fucking character. Meanwhile, Waluigi isn't from any Super Mario game, he's not in any of Wario's games, and he's not even the main character of a single game. I mean, Jesus Christ, he's purely a spin-off character that was created only when Wario needed a partner in Mario Tennis. That's his legacy. Now, whatever, I get it. He's a fucking joke character that's been blown out of proportion, and I'm sure that there are some people that genuinely want Waluigi in Super Smash Bros. But it won't happen anytime soon. We all know that Sakurai plays favorites every now and then with Kirby and Kid Icarus, but I also think that the opposite is true, because I genuinely think that Sakurai hates Waluigi and will never put him in. I mean, as an assist trophy, Sakurai could have designed Waluigi to throw bomb-bombs or do something way more interesting, but instead, he gave him the tennis racket. He gave him the fucking tennis racket. That subtle addition is such a fuck you to everyone who wants to legitimize Waluigi as an actual Super Mario character, because Sakurai knows who Waluigi really is. He's not a Super Mario character, he's not on par with Wario or Daisy, he's a fucking made-up shit character from Mario Tennis. And that's why you like him, and that's also why he doesn't deserve to be a playable character. The next meme character that popped up throughout all the polls and forums was Skull Kid from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, who might be one of the weakest choices for a Zelda character by far. Now, don't get me wrong, I fucking love Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask is one of the best fucking games ever made, but that doesn't matter right now, because we're talking about Super Smash Bros. And if I had to pick a new character from The Legend of Zelda, Skull Kid isn't a very good choice. I mean, in terms of moveset potential, Skull Kid does absolutely nothing throughout the entire game. This is the summary of every single thing that Skull Kid does throughout the entirety of Majora's Mask. The game starts and he steals Link's ocarina, he then steals Epona, he curses Link and transforms him into a Deku Scrub, and then he screams and pulls the moon down to Termina. That's it. So right off the bat, Skull Kid has fuck all to work with. It's like, oh, he can do that one attack where he goes, and then he can do another attack where he goes, and this final smash can bring the moon down, and then he can have another move where he goes, and then his side B can have him stealing Epona or something, and then he can have a taunt where he plays one note on the ocarina and laughs. And it's like, wow, what a great concept. Endless possibilities. Now, in terms of a legacy, Majora's Mask is a fan favorite, but in the grand scheme of The Legend of Zelda, Skull Kid has only appeared in one game. You see, the biggest issue with The Legend of Zelda is that outside of the main trio of Link, Zelda, and Ganon, everyone else has made incredibly minor appearances throughout the entire series. I mean, at least with the fill-in characters, there's a very clear hierarchy that determines the order in which characters get added. But the issue with The Legend of Zelda is that every side character in the series is equally insignificant. I mean, out of all the side characters in The Legend of Zelda, which one's the most important? Well, the problem with that question is that there really isn't an answer, because each character is only important within the one game that they originate from. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you could put in Skull Kid, Midna, Girahim, Zant, Vaati, Impa, Tingle, any of the 4 champions, Tetra, the King of Hyrule, Pig Ganon, Medley, Agnem, Demise, Yuga, Fi, Groose, Ravio, and the list goes on and on and on, and each character is equally as important as everyone else. So in terms of importance in The Legend of Zelda, the only thing that makes Skull Kid a much higher priority in the Smash community is because everyone just arbitrarily prefers him over everyone else, which is a major problem when Sakurai is the person who makes the final decisions. I mean, from Sakurai's viewpoint, why would he pick Skull Kid over every other Zelda character in existence? Well, the answer is that he doesn't have a reason to. So at the end of the day, he'll probably just end up picking whatever he prefers instead, which means that if we ever get a new Zelda character for Super Smash Bros., it could probably be fucking anyone. So if any new Zelda character gets added into Super Smash Bros., it will have probably been in Sakurai's best interests, so he can pretty much do whatever he wants and I'll be happy. Now, another assist trophy that was a bit unexpected was Springman from ARMS. A lot of fans were surprised that Springman was an assist trophy because he seemed like an ideally perfect candidate for Super Smash Bros. He's a character from a brand new Nintendo franchise, he could incorporate his abilities into a pretty unique moveset, and it almost seemed like Springman was an absolute lock-in pick. So, what happened? Well, while Springman could have been a perfect fit for Super Smash Bros., you have to realize that ARMS made no cultural impact whatsoever. ARMS came out, it sold a lot of copies, but after about a week or two, it seemed like everyone just stopped playing because the game is kind of boring. In contrast, Splatoon was a relatively new franchise as well, and everyone fucking loved it. People were playing that shit for fucking months, the Splatfests were blowing up social media, and Splatoon was immediately indoctrinated into the Nintendo Hall of Fame. So, when the Inklings were announced for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, it was like, yeah, no shit, the Inklings are a perfect fit because Splatoon is fucking awesome. Meanwhile, everyone was speculating what new characters were going to be added to the game, and everyone's just like, ugh, I guess they could add in Springman, because ARMS is new. Like, no one fucking gives a shit! It's like everyone had this nonchalant reaction assuming that Springman would be in Super Smash Bros., despite the fact that no one gives a fuck. Like, when Springman was announced as an assist trophy, no one gave a shit. I mean, some fans were surprised that he wasn't in the game, but that's about it. I mean, if Springman was such an amazing character pick for Super Smash Bros., then where's the enthusiasm? Why wasn't Springman everyone's #1 pick for the roster? Where are all the people that are upset that Springman is an assist trophy? If Springman was such an easy pick for Super Smash Bros., then why does no one give a fuck that he isn't playable? Well, it's because no one wanted this fucking character in Super Smash Bros. Because ARMS fucking sucks. Now, the next assist trophy that I want to talk about is Lyn from Fire Emblem. Honestly, I don't even give a shit about Fire Emblem, but Lyn looks like a pretty cool character. I like her outfit, I think her weapon could give her a pretty unique moveset when compared to Marth and Ike, and I remember back in the day when people actually wanted her in Brawl. It seemed like Sakurai was setting her up to be the next character to make it in, but now that the roster is fucking bloated with Fire Emblem characters, it seems like everyone lost interest. It kind of sucks, because I feel like the success of Fire Emblem Awakening resulted in Lyn getting snubbed, because now that the roster is littered with all these new Fire Emblem characters, the chances of her getting in have dropped dramatically. I don't know, kinda sucks. Now, there's a lot of other assist trophies in the game, but the characters I mentioned are all the ones that I found to be highly requested. You might agree or disagree with my own line of thinking, and that's perfectly fine, because it's entirely possible that any of these assist trophies could potentially become a playable character in the future. At the end of the day, if Sakurai wants to turn a character I hate into a playable character, I don't really give a shit. In fact, if Sakurai does do that, it probably meant that he was able to create an interesting moveset, and I'll probably end up liking them anyways. Hell, I remember back in the day thinking that King K. Rool was an absolute stupid choice for Super Smash Bros. But now that he's in the game, it's like, oh shit, he's actually pretty cool. That's why as long as Sakurai is giving a character his seal of approval, I honestly don't give a shit either way. Still, that doesn't change the fact that a lot of people are requesting some pretty shitty characters. So let's talk about all the popular roster picks that didn't even make it as assist trophies. Let's talk about the dumbest, most niche, most impossible, irrelevant character picks to ever be requested for Super Smash Bros. Well, before we even talk about the extremely niche character picks, let's talk about one of the dumbest character picks in Super Smash Bros. History, which is obviously Goku from Dragon Ball Z. Now, this shouldn't be something I have to say, but I kind of just want to talk about it, because as stupid as a pick as Goku is, we've also seen some pretty ridiculous character picks get in anyways. For example, Cloud was one of the stupidest picks you can make back in the day. If you went to GameFAQs and told people that you wanted Cloud in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, you were written off as a fucking retard. Back in the day, Cloud was the equivalent of the Goku pick. It was something that would never happen. It was a character that was completely out of reach. If you wanted Cloud in Super Smash Bros., you were asking the impossible. But now that Sakurai broke his own rules a bit for Smash 4, Cloud somehow managed to get in. Now, is it entirely possible that Goku can get into Super Smash Bros? Most likely not. But maybe 30 to 40 years in the future, who the fuck knows? As stupid as it sounds, it might actually happen someday. But whenever that day comes, that's when I officially check the fuck out. Because once you start adding in stupid ass characters like Spider-Man or James Bond, that's when Super Smash Bros. As a series is officially over. You see, the difference with Goku is that he isn't a fucking video game character. And if there was any unwritten rule in Super Smash Bros., it's that every character is originally from a video game. And if Sakurai or anyone else breaks that rule, the entire concept of the series is ruined. Moving on to actual video game characters, one of the most highly requested and relevant characters for Super Smash Bros. Has got to go to Gino from Super Mario RPG. Now, as stupid as a character pick as Gino is, I think he does have some decent moveset potential, as most RPG characters do. However, the thing I really hate about Gino is that he's completely irrelevant. For those not familiar, Gino is essentially a side character that's only appeared in one spin-off game 22 years ago. I mean, I can always talk shit about how horrible of a choice Waluigi is, but at least he's been in more than one spin-off game. At least Waluigi has been in Mario Tennis and Mario Kart. Meanwhile, Gino is about as niche as you can get. He's the fucking most nothing character to ever exist, which begs the question of why anyone even gives a shit. Why do people want Gino? Well, it's because they like Super Mario RPG, and Mario, Peach, and Bowser are already in the game. So obviously, if you still like that game, you'd either want Gino or Mallow next. Who the fuck is Mallow? Well, Mallow is essentially a side character that's only appeared in one spin-off game 22 years ago. I mean, can you imagine if people legitimately wanted Mallow in Super Smash Bros? I mean, what kind of person would want such an irrelevant, stupid character like that to be in Smash? Oh, wait! Fuck! Now, I think the problem with the Gino pick is that the fans really don't understand why Super Mario RPG was an important game. You see, when Super Mario RPG was released, it was a big deal during the time because it was the first Super Mario RPG. The fact of the matter is that anyone who bought this game solely bought it for the purpose to play through an RPG with Mario characters. And anyone who pretends that Gino or Mallow had any influence over that game's success is a fucking liar. Hilariously enough, Super Mario RPG technically already has 3 representatives in Super Smash Bros. You know, the ones on the box that people actually care about. Now, would I be mad if Gino made it into the game someday? Not really. Honestly, I bet Gino could be a really fun character to play as. I mean, as long as Sakurai gives his seal of approval, I honestly don't give a fuck. But can we please just acknowledge the fact that the Super Mario RPG fans are propping up Gino as his all-important influential character, despite the fact that Mallow is just as important and completely irrelevant, because the second you make that comparison, Gino starts to look like a really shitty character pick. You see, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter who the fans like more, because at the end of the day, they're both shit characters from an extremely old spin-off game that came out 22 years ago. So let's stop pretending that Gino is anything special. Another highly requested character is Paper Mario from the Paper Mario series, which is a much better spiritual successor to Super Mario RPG. Well, at least it used to be. Still, as much as I enjoyed the first 2 games in the series, I really can't see what would make Paper Mario a good character. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, what makes Paper Mario different from Mario? Well, for starters, Paper Mario uses a hammer, and that's about it. Now, in all seriousness, maybe Sakurai could figure out a way to incorporate the partners into his moveset, maybe he could work in the button commands into some of his smash attacks, or maybe he could incorporate some of his badge abilities into some interesting attacks. Hypothetically, there's a lot of stuff you could do with Paper Mario, but I don't think there's that much to work with. Unlike other RPGs, the Paper Mario series is incredibly simplistic, and all of Paper Mario's abilities are just jump attacks and hammer attacks, so when it comes to designing an entire moveset, there isn't that much variety. I mean, maybe he could have a B-up move where he does a jump attack, maybe he could use his hammer for his smash and tilt attacks, but I don't know, would that even be that interesting? Honestly, this is one of the main reasons why I didn't like Super Paper Mario, because once you take Paper Mario outside of the turn-based combat system, he's just really boring to play as. To make matters worse, the entire series has essentially been shit for the past 15 years or so. I mean, I can imagine that they could make a really cool moveset with the first 2 games as a template, but then what happens when Paper Mario is included as a character using all the dumb shit from the spin-off games? Like, can you imagine if Paper Mario was playable in Super Smash Bros., but then his final smash was summoning a giant 3D scissor? Can you imagine how fucking disappointing that would be? So honestly, as much as I love the classic Paper Mario games, I don't think it's really worth adding in Paper Mario, because even if his moveset is solid, all you're really doing is adding in Mario again. I mean, sure, Paper Mario represents the Paper Mario series, but it doesn't increase the overall representation in the grand scheme of Super Smash Bros. I mean, when you really think about it, it's like the equivalent of adding in Mario from Mario Kart, or adding in Mario from Mario Party. And even if they all had different movesets, it just doesn't really mean anything. Still, the potential's there, but unless Sakurai can create a moveset that's unique enough, it'll probably feel like the equivalent of adding in Toon Link or some shit. The next couple of characters that have been highly requested as well are the Chorus Kids and Karate Joe from the Rhythm Heaven series. For those not familiar, Rhythm Heaven is essentially a series of games that requires the player to play through some rhythm-based mini-games, which is sort of similar to WarioWare. Now, the reason I'm explaining that is because no one knows who the fuck these characters are. I mean, out of all the characters in the Rhythm Heaven series, why are the Chorus Kids and Karate Joe the most highly requested? Well, the answer to that is that they're sort of the mascots to Rhythm Heaven, except not really, because the only important thing about these characters is that they sometimes appear on the box art, or they've made multiple appearances throughout the series. So right off the bat, it seems like nobody besides the hardcore fans of Rhythm Heaven even give a shit about these characters at all. Now, to be fair, I suppose that hasn't stopped characters from getting into Super Smash Bros. Before, but then that begs the question of what their movesets would be. Well, for Karate Joe, his rhythm minigame is based off him punching and kicking random objects in a bland, empty room. So clearly there's fuck all to work with. I mean, Jesus Christ, Karate Joe is literally just a knockoff clone of Ryu from Street Fighter, who is much more popular and is already in the fucking game. So as far as I'm concerned, Karate Joe will never make it in whatsoever. Meanwhile, all the Chorus Kids do is stand in a bland, empty room and open their mouths to the rhythm of the music. That's all they fucking do! It's like, wow, they could have a side B move where the Chorus Kids go, but then they can have a B up move where they go, but then their final smash could go like, wow, there's endless possibilities with the Course Kids. How the fuck are these characters not in Smash? So with fuck all to work with, what makes the Course Kids more popular of a pick than Karate Joe? Well, apparently, since the Course Kids will be working together as 3 different characters, that means that Sakurai could bullshit a moveset that would be interesting? Because there's 3 of them? Like, apparently the Course Kids are such a terrible pick that this is the one and only gimmick that the fans can come up with? Well, like I said before, obviously Sakurai could bullshit a moveset and come up with something interesting, but honestly, I don't see it happening. I mean, the Smash community has compared the Course Kids to the Ice Climbers since they've made it into the game, but at least the Ice Climbers can jump and break blocks with their hammer. Even the NES game had different stages, enemies, and 2 distinct different characters to play as. At least the Ice Climbers can fucking move. Meanwhile, everyone's begging for these Rhythm Heaven characters with literally fuck all to work with. Like, what the fuck do you expect Sakurai to do? The hardcore fans of Rhythm Heaven are essentially begging Sakurai to make an interesting character out of nothing. Meanwhile, Sakurai is probably looking up game footage of the Glee Club minigame at his fucking desk, and he's just like, what do you guys want from me? Now, to be fair, maybe Sakurai could incorporate some rhythm-based attacks or something, but it's such a fucking stretch. In the grand scheme of things, these characters are completely irrelevant, and they both have absolutely no moveset potential. Sure, Sakurai could make something up, but why would he do that when the end result is adding in that one character that stands in a blank empty room and punches things? Like, oh boy, I can't wait for Sakurai to add in those characters that stand in a blank empty room and sing. Like, why even bother? Moving down the list, another popular character that fans have requested is Chrono from Chrono Trigger, which I'm actually fine with. Chrono's a JRPG character with some decent moveset potential. He's from a classic, critically acclaimed Super NES game, and for the most part, I think he has a lot going for him to be included in Super Smash Bros. Now, do I think that Chrono Trigger is such an iconic game that Chrono deserves to be playable in Super Smash Bros? Not really, but it might be cool to see someday. Again, this is an incredibly low priority pick, but at least it's not as offensive as some of the other choices. One of the more obscure picks I've seen on some of the character polls is Mac Rider, which has never made any sense whatsoever. So for those who aren't familiar, Mac Rider is basically from one NES game that Nintendo made and swiftly forgot about. And apparently the Smash community is constantly requesting Mac Rider because God forbid they want a character anyone cares about. Now, as much as I want to shit on Mac Rider, there's actually been a lot of NES characters like Mac Rider that have made it into Super Smash Bros. We've gotten the Duck Hunt Dog, Little Mac, Rob, the Ice Climbers, and Pit. So I suppose Mac Rider's inclusion isn't incredibly unrealistic. Still, at the same time, Mac Rider is probably one of the worst NES characters you could add, because honestly, no one really gives a shit. To make matters worse, the only thing Mac Rider does throughout the entire game is ride on a motorcycle. Like, what the fuck do you expect Sakurai to do? I mean, I guess you could make him an Echo Fighter to Captain Falcon, since they're both essentially the same character, but honestly, that's kind of lame. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that some people want Mac Rider included because he's a part of Nintendo's history, but honestly, Mac Rider isn't that important. I mean, you could argue that Mac Rider was the inspiration for F-Zero, but then you're really ruining your argument at that point, cause no one even gives a fuck about F-Zero. Like, F-Zero is a fucking dead series at this point, and you got these people out here arguing that they should add in an even worse version of Captain Falcon. Like, why even bother? Now, if any RPG characters were to get into Super Smash Bros., it would most likely be some of the new Xenoblade Chronicles characters, mainly Rex, Pyra, and Elma. Still, while these characters are more likely to get in, that doesn't change the fact that I don't give a fuck about these characters at all. You see, Shulk felt like a much more genuine inclusion because the original Xenoblade Chronicles was almost like an immediate cult classic. In fact, the only reason I even heard about Xenoblade Chronicles was because the fan base was rabid enough to start a professionally run fan campaign known as Operation Rainfall, which helped to bring Xenoblade Chronicles to the West, as well as the last story and Pandora's Tower. Leading up to Shulk's inclusion in Super Smash Bros. 4, all I ever heard about was how good Xenoblade Chronicles was, so when Shulk was announced for Super Smash Bros., it was almost like a no-brainer. Meanwhile, I haven't heard nearly as good things about the other games. I mean, Xenoblade Chronicles X was so forgettable that I honestly forgot that it came out, and all I've seen from Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is how trashy the art style is. Like, seriously, look at this generic anime shit! It's so fucking embarrassing. Like, this game was designed by filthy sex perverts. Like, I don't want these fucking characters in Smash! Like, do people actually want this twink-ass fucking bitch in Super Smash Bros. With his fucking little thigh gap suit? Does anyone besides the filthy sex perverts want this anime titty monster with the fucking thong straps? Like, Jesus Christ. I mean, sure, Sakurai could probably do something interesting with them as a single character, but fuck them! These characters fucking suck! The fact of the matter is that the fans who ran Operation Rainfall, who loved the original Xenoblade Chronicles, wouldn't have given a fuck about this generic anime shit. Meanwhile, it feels like Xenoblade Chronicles X just ended up being a sequel that wasn't as good, and Elma just feels completely forgettable solely for the fact that no one bought the Wii U. So at the end of the day, these characters are basically just writing off of the success of the original Xenoblade Chronicles, and I really don't think they deserve to get in. Moving on to the next JRPG character, we have Lloyd from Tales of Symphonia, which apparently is a game that came out. So who the fuck is Lloyd? Fucked if I know! Well, to be honest, I did a bit of research, and apparently people really want Lloyd because Tales of Symphonia is the most popular game out of the 16 Tales games. Apparently. Legacy-wise, Tales of Symphonia was originally exclusive to the GameCube, but besides that, there really isn't anything about Lloyd or the Tales series that's distinctively related to Nintendo at all. I mean, sure, Cloud was an outsider pick as well, but at least the Final Fantasy series has its roots and origins on Nintendo consoles. As obscure of a pick as Shulk was, at least he's a Nintendo character. Meanwhile, the Tales series is essentially a third-party series that seems to just whore themselves out to whoever's willing to take them. He might make for an interesting character, but he's hardly related to Nintendo at all, and he's not really worth adding in because no one knows who he is. Like, who the fuck is Lloyd? What game is this? Continuing down the list, another highly requested character I've seen voted in the polls was Heihachi from Tekken. Why all the hype for Heihachi? Well, it's because Bandai Namco is helping Nintendo develop Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So I guess people think that they should include a Tekken character because it would be easy or something? Honestly, I've never really understood this logic. Like, Sakurai has put in a shit ton of effort to include outsider picks like Solid Snake, Sonic, Cloud, Bayonetta, Mega Man, and all this other crazy shit, so why is this even a discussion? I mean, sure, it's probably a lot easier to include Namco characters with Bandai Namco developing the game, but does that really matter when Sakurai can pretty much get any character he wants? Like, do people think that Heihachi is more likely to appear in Super Smash Bros. Because they think that Sakurai is lazy or something? Like, I don't fucking get it. Anyways, I'm sure Heihachi would have an interesting moveset to work with. But does anyone outside of the fighting game community even give a shit about Tekken? I don't think so. You see, the important thing about the outsider picks for Super Smash Bros. Is that the characters have to be massively popular, and that's an important distinction, because in the grand scheme of things, the fighting game community is relatively small, and Super Smash Bros. Fans aren't in the fighting game community because Super Smash Bros. Isn't a fighting game. Now, obviously, you can play it as a fighting game. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's been at EVO, I can't deny that. But that's never been the main goal of the series. First and foremost, Super Smash Bros. Has always been a crossover party game, so the most important thing for the series is to get the most popular and iconic characters on the roster. And as far as fighting games are concerned, Ken and Ryu are by far the most popular and iconic characters in fighting game history. Meanwhile, Tekken is pretty popular, but it's nowhere near as iconic as Street Fighter and has relatively no history with Nintendo whatsoever. Honestly, if they could add in any more fighting game characters, they should probably just add in Chun-Li and call it a day. I mean, it would be pretty cool to see Heihachi in the game, but do we really need Tekken characters in Super Smash Bros? Not really. Another popular character that fans want in Super Smash Bros. Is Sora from Kingdom Hearts, which is probably one of the most embarrassing series of games ever. Sora seems like he could work as a Super Smash Bros. Character, but I honestly don't give a fuck. Legacy-wise, the entire Kingdom Hearts series is basically an incomprehensible dumpster fire that has no relation to Nintendo whatsoever. And even at its best, the entire series is just stupid anime shit mixed in with Disney fan service. Like, how does anyone think that Kingdom Hearts deserves any recognition in Super Smash Bros? Like, you look up any footage of this stupid-ass series of games and like Winnie the Pooh's there for some fucking reason, and Goofy's all like, oh gosh, we gotta kill Sephiroth. Like, fuck this. I mean, I'm sure Sora would function perfectly as a character, but Kingdom Hearts is so fucking dumb. Like, can you imagine how jarring it would be if Sora's final smash included Donald Duck and Goofy? Can you imagine how fucking stupid it would be if there was a Kingdom Hearts stage revolving around Pirates of the Caribbean or the fucking Little Mermaid? I mean, at that point, you might as well add in Goku. So if Kingdom Hearts ever gets any recognition in Super Smash Bros., it'll probably just be all the embarrassing anime shit that no one gives a fuck about. I mean, sure, you could probably include Sora without adding in Disney characters, but then that's basically gutting the whole concept of the series. Sora might not be as stupid of a character pick as Goku, but the fact that Kingdom Hearts is so tied up with Disney in general would make Sora feel really out of place. I mean, the only reason anyone likes Kingdom Hearts is because the entire series banks off of classic Disney films, which goes in complete opposition to Super Smash Bros., which is purely about video games. So why does Kingdom Hearts deserve any recognition in a video game crossover when the entire concept of the series revolves around pandering to an entirely different medium? The fact of the matter is that the entire origin of this character is purely through a collaboration outside of the video game industry. And if Sora ever gets added into Smash, it'll be the first of many bad decisions that will result in Goku getting into Super Smash Bros. And ruining the entire series. Moving on to characters that are solely related to video games once again, I also saw that fans really wanted Doom Guy and Master Chief. Aka, guy with gun who shoots things. I've never really understood why people request these kinds of characters, because for the most part, the only moveset potential they have is shooting their respective guns, which is kind of boring. So the only way these kinds of characters would make it into Super Smash Bros. Is if Sakurai was able to faithfully reincorporate their more unique weapons into an interesting moveset. Like, maybe Master Chief could incorporate the energy sword and the sticky grenades, maybe Doom Guy could use a chainsaw and the BFG, and at the end of the day, I suppose that there's enough moveset potential to create something interesting. Still, there is something about these kinds of characters that definitely feels distinctively not Nintendo, so I can't really say with confidence that they'll get in anytime soon. Either way, I don't really give a shit if they're included or not, because if Sakurai gives them the seal of approval, then it should be fine, but if he doesn't, then that's fine too. Another batch of highly requested characters that fans want in Super Smash Bros. Are the Capcom characters. Now, if there was any company that was on par with Nintendo's rich history with video games, it would definitely be Capcom. And I've seen a ton of requests for a lot of their characters. I've seen Phoenix Wright from Ace Attorney, Amaterasu from Okami, Beautiful Joe, Dante from Devil May Cry, Zero from Mega Man X, Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, to keep things simple, basically any Capcom pick is completely fine by me. They're all incredibly iconic characters, they all have a pretty rich history in video games, most Capcom characters have really good moveset potential, and almost any character from Capcom would make a great pick for Super Smash Bros. Moving on! The next group of characters that I saw fans requesting for Super Smash Bros. Are the kinds of characters I'd like to refer to as bullshit platforming mascot characters from the 90s. The most common character picks I've seen from this category are Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, and Rayman. Now, if I have to be honest, I think that all these characters suck. I mean, you could argue that they've all had history with Nintendo in the past, but honestly, the only time anyone cared about Crash and Spyro was when they were exclusively on the PlayStation. In fact, the only reason Crash and Spyro transitioned to other platforms in the 2000s was because they were both starting to become really bad. Rayman's probably the most competent out of the three, but then why the fuck would Rayman get into Smash if the Rabbids are already much more popular? I mean, Jesus Christ, the Rabbids got a fucking crossover game with Mario and Rayman was nowhere in sight. Like, you think Rayman's getting into Smash anytime soon? Now, is it possible that Sakurai could create a moveset for all of these characters? Sure, he could do that just fine. Now, just because Sakurai could make a moveset, does that mean that any of these characters should be included into Super Smash Bros? Not really. Personally, I think that Crash and Spyro are by far the worst choices, and even Rayman seems kind of boring. Not only are these characters not related to Nintendo in the slightest, but they're also completely irrelevant when compared to the most popular bullshit platforming mascot character from the 90s, Sonic the Hedgehog. So in terms of representation, you already have the most popular character out of that entire genre already in Super Smash Bros, and he's still relevant today despite most of his games being really shitty. In comparison, Crash and Spyro are still living off of the glory days of the 90s, while the Rayman series is being cannibalized by its shitty spin-off characters. Like, sure, they could technically work as characters in Smash, but who fucking gives a shit? Moving on to Pokemon, one of the most highly requested Pokemon characters I've seen so far were Decidueye and Sceptile, which seems kind of random if you're not familiar with Pokemon. You see, in every iteration of Super Smash Bros., they've always added in a new Pokemon from the latest generation. In the first game, they added Pikachu and Jigglypuff from Gen 1. In Super Smash Bros. Melee, they added in Pichu from Gen 2. In Super Smash Bros. Brawl, they added in Lucario from Gen 4. In Super Smash Bros. 4, they added in Greninja from Gen 6. And for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, they added in Incineroar from Gen 7. Now, obviously, they added in Mewtwo in the Pokemon Trainer for some Gen 1 pandering, but besides that, every Super Smash Bros. Game has always added in at least one new Pokemon character from the latest entry in the series. So, what's special about Decidueye and Sceptile? Well, the logic with picking these two Pokemon is that they're both a third evolution grass starter type Pokemon that would complete the trio of third evolution starters. Now, if I have to be honest, I never really enjoyed the inclusion of Pokemon in the roster, mostly because I find them to be kind of boring, but I do really like the idea of having a third evolution grass type starter Pokemon. As well as these Pokemon could fit on the roster, the only issue with Sceptile and Decidueye is that I don't see it happening at all. I mean, in terms of having a Gen 3 representative, the ship's already sailed at this point. The fact of the matter is that by the time the next Smash game comes out, there will always be a new generation of Pokemon that will end up taking up the spot of any potential Gen 3 or Gen 5 Pokemon. So Sceptile isn't going to happen. Decidueye had the potential to get into Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but now that Incineroar has taken the Gen 7 spot, that shit isn't going to happen. I mean, sure, Sakurai has broken the rules constantly, but besides Gen 1 pandering, the current precedent is that only one Pokemon from the latest generation will ever get into the latest Super Smash Bros. Game. So I'm hedging my bets on Decidueye never making it in. Honestly, if any grass type Pokemon ever get added in for the future, it will most likely be whatever is from the latest generation of Pokemon during the time, which will most likely be Gen 8 if it's for the current DLC, or possibly Gen 9 for the next game. Getting close to the end, another character that I've seen fans requesting was Solaire from Dark Souls, which I think is kind of dumb. Now, me personally, I'd love to get a Dark Souls character in Super Smash Bros., but the constant Solaire pandering is fucking obnoxious. For starters, it would make way more sense for Solaire to be an assist trophy at best, because one, that would actually be more fitting considering his role in Dark Souls. I mean, if you're an actual fucking fan of the series, you know that. And two, because Solaire isn't the main character of Dark Souls, you fucking idiots. Now, listen up, you fucking bozos. If Super Smash Bros. Was planning on adding in a playable Dark Souls character, it would have to be a generic character with the Elite Knight set with a sword and shield. And they could call him the Chosen Undead or some shit. They can incorporate some of the consumable items for his special attacks, they could give the character a really heavy roll with invincibility frames as a side B, maybe they could give him different armor sets with each palette swap, and they could even incorporate a bunch of other shit from Dark Souls 2 and 3. Hell, they could include some pyromancy spells, maybe somehow incorporate some of the stance switching. I mean, you could do fucking anything with this character. You see, the problem with Solaire is that you're super limited to what he could do, and if you're gonna force in non-canon abilities to give him an interesting moveset, they should just make the generic Dark Souls protagonist instead and make Solaire an assist trophy. That way, when Solaire shows up as an assist trophy, all the dipshit fans who love Solaire can praise the sun like a fucking retard. Oh, I saw Solaire praise the sun and I clapped. Also, fuck Undertale. Sans fucking sucks dick. I don't want to see him or his stupid fucking face in Super Smash Bros. Because Toby Fox is a fucking hack fraud one-trick pony who blatantly steals jokes from SpongeBob. And yes, I did play the Deltarune demo. It's the same fucking shit. Papyrus sucks dick too. Undertale can suck my fucking cock and balls. Now, the fact that people think that Undertale deserves any recognition in Super Smash Bros. Is just insulting. Like, you think that Undertale is just as influential as Final Fantasy, Sonic the Hedgehog, Metal Gear Solid, Street Fighter, Bayonetta, or Persona? Like, shut the fuck up. You see, if there's any series that's even on par with that lineup, it's probably Dark Souls. And despite the Dark Souls fanbase being just as obnoxious and fucking retarded, at least the series is massively successful and has impacted the entire video game industry in a meaningful way. So despite the fact that Dark Souls and Nintendo have almost no relation whatsoever, I think having a Dark Souls character would be a really interesting outsider character pick, considering the fact that Dark Souls is an incredibly influential series of games. On the other hand, Undertale sucks dick in comparison. I mean, maybe Sans could make for an interesting assist trophy someday, but to say that Undertale deserves any recognition outside of that is fucking ridiculous. Maybe Sakurai will give Undertale the seal of approval someday, but if that ever happens, that will probably be the one and only decision that I would absolutely disagree with. Now, as much as I don't want to talk about this next character pick, we have to talk about Minecraft. It's something I've been avoiding up until this point because there's actually people out there who want a Minecraft character in Super Smash Bros. And it might actually happen someday. As much as I hate to admit it, Minecraft is one of the most successful video games of all time, and it easily surpasses the individual sales of everything on the Super Smash Bros. Roster. Like I said before, the problem with a lot of indie game characters is that they're all one-trick ponies that will never be popular again. But Minecraft is probably the main exception, because it's one of the only indie games that have been so massively successful that Sakurai could add in a playable Minecraft character in Super Smash Bros. And it wouldn't be unjustified. So legacy-wise, Minecraft has been on Nintendo consoles and sadly has a lot going for it. Now, the interesting thing about having a Minecraft character is that Sakurai has always tried to replicate the character's abilities in their respective games as closely as possible, which means that if a Minecraft character gets into Super Smash Bros., they will most likely have the same shitty animations they have in Minecraft. It also means that most of their moveset would be based off of weapons and items that you use in Minecraft, which could result in a really boring moveset considering the fact that the combat in Minecraft is fucking awful. I mean, the most interesting thing about Minecraft is mining the terrain, using blocks to build, and crafting materials. So if Sakurai can't incorporate those concepts into an interesting moveset, I don't think a Minecraft character would be all that interesting. Still, if Sakurai gives a Minecraft character his seal of approval, then I'll probably be fine with it, even though the entire concept makes me want to die. So, for the most part, that's about it. All these characters that I've talked about were some of the most highly requested characters for the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate DLC. However, you might have noticed that I didn't include a couple of fan favorites. Now, the reason for that is because now that I've shit all over everyone else's favorite character picks, it's only fair to talk about my own personal picks for Super Smash Bros. And explain why my character picks are completely superior to everyone else's, cause apparently everyone sucks dick at picking characters for Smash except for me. So, this next batch of characters that I'm gonna talk about are by far my personal top choices to be included in Super Smash Bros. In the nearby future. Now, if I had to make a number one pick for a series of games that deserves representation in Super Smash Bros., it would easily go to Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter is currently the most popular series of games Capcom has ever produced. And as much as I love all the other Capcom choices for Super Smash Bros., Monster Hunter is by far the most deserving of that spot. The series does have its roots on the PS2, but Monster Hunter Tri and onward expanded the series' appeal to Western audiences, all while on Nintendo's consoles. Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate was massively successful despite being on the Wii U. Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate expanded on the series' popularity due to the massive success of the 3DS, and because of that, Monster Hunter World has now become the best-selling game in the history of Capcom. So right off the bat, the Monster Hunter series has worldwide appeal with both Japanese and Western audiences. It's one of the most popular series of games that Capcom is currently producing, and has also had multiple exclusive games on Nintendo consoles that led to the series' popularity. Not only is Monster Hunter incredibly popular, but the moveset potential for a Monster Hunter character has infinite possibilities. Right off the bat, you have 14 different weapons to work with, which all have completely different movesets and mechanics. You have an entire massive list of consumable items that could be incorporated into the Monster Hunter's moveset. You have potions and pitfall traps and explosives and poison bombs, and all the new crazy shit from Monster Hunter World like the slinger and the grapple hook. You could have a Monster Hunter character with the great sword and build the character around being an extremely hard hitter that requires a bit of strategy. Maybe you could incorporate the weapon sharpness by using the whetstones. Maybe you could have the Monster Hunter sheath their weapon to gain mobility, while also having different button commands to use different items. You can give them some of the special moves from Generations. Each palette swap of the Monster Hunter could be a different set of weapons and in-game armor. Like, you could do so many different things with the Monster Hunter character that it's overwhelming. You could give the Monster Hunter a bow and incorporate all the different coatings. You could incorporate the Palicos and have them fight alongside the Monster Hunter. The final smash could be the Dragonator. Like, oh my fucking god, you could do anything with this character. So as an outsider pick, the Monster Hunter has worldwide appeal and popularity. It has multiple exclusive games on Nintendo consoles that led to its popularity. It's currently one of Capcom's most successful series of games. The entire series is so complex that the Monster Hunter's moveset would have infinite possibilities. And that's why the Monster Hunter is by far the best character pick that deserves to be in Super Smash Bros. That's why the Monster Hunter is by far my complete number one top priority pick to be included in the future games in the series. I mean, Jesus Christ, the fucking Rathalos is in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as a boss fight and an assist trophy, featuring an entire Monster Hunter stage in World of Light. Like, come on! Now, my next character pick that I'd like to see for future games in the series is Banjo and Kazooie from Banjo-Kazooie. This character pick isn't nearly as high of a priority as the Monster Hunter, but I do think that out of all the other bullshit platforming mascot characters from the 90s, Banjo and Kazooie has by far the best moveset potential and is the most appropriate pick for Super Smash Bros. You see, while Banjo-Kazooie is owned by Microsoft, the first two games in the series were exclusively on the Nintendo 64 and were created by the second-party studio known as Rare. In many ways, some of the best games on the Super NES and the Nintendo 64 were made exclusively by Rare, and during the time, you could put the quality of Rare's games on par with Nintendo. But then Microsoft bought the company and ruined it, like they always do with everything. You see, Rare's partnership with Nintendo played a very important role in Nintendo's success, especially with the Nintendo 64. And that's why I think that Banjo-Kazooie would be a perfect representative for that era. As an outsider pick, Banjo and Kazooie are the most closely related to Nintendo, and if any Microsoft-owned IP deserves any recognition in Super Smash Bros., it would most definitely be Banjo-Kazooie by far. In terms of moveset potential, Banjo and Kazooie have a ton of abilities that Sakurai could just assign to their respective button commands. They got the Beak Barge, the Talon Trot, the Roll Attack, the Rat-a-tat, the Flip Flap could be their Double Jump, the Down B could be the Beak Buster, you could use the Fly Pad animation in the Beak Bomb for their Up B, and all the standard attacks could easily go into their Tilt and Smash attacks. If Banjo and Kazooie was added into Super Smash Bros., they could play exactly the same as they do in the first 2 games in the series. Now, do I think that Banjo and Kazooie is one of the most important character picks ever? Not really. I mean, if you asked me back when Super Smash Bros. 4 was coming out, Banjo and Kazooie wouldn't even be near the top of my list. But now that most of the important characters are already in the game, Banjo and Kazooie have finally reached near the top of my list as a character pick that I'd be interested to see someday. Now, I know I said that the Monster Hunter was my #1 pick, but fuck that! Fuck that shit! Because my actual #1 pick for Super Smash Bros. Is Wonder Red from the wonderful 101, aka the best fucking game ever made! Now, my first 2 picks are completely logical choices, and I think they have a pretty good chance of getting into the game. But Wonder Red will never happen. Legacy-wise, the wonderful 101 came out on the Wii U, sold like 10,000 copies, faded off into obscurity, and hasn't even been ported to any other systems. You see, as much as I made fun of Waluigi, Skull Kid, Gino, Chorus Kids, and all the other stupid-ass character picks, Wonder Red is by far the least popular pick ever. However, if there was anything going for Wonder Red, it's that he's the main character of a relatively new Nintendo franchise. So despite how unpopular he is, Wonder Red is in a much better position than most of the dumb meme characters. I mean, if anything, Wonder Red is somewhat similar to Springman. In many ways, both characters are sort of similar in the sense that no one gives a fuck about them, despite the fact that they're both relatively new Nintendo characters. However, while ARMS sold a lot of copies and turned out to be kind of boring, the wonderful 101 sold nothing and turned out to be one of the best games ever made. And if Wonder Red has anything going for him over Springman, it's that Wonder Red is a character from a cult classic. And Super Smash Bros. Has had plenty of characters like that before. In terms of likelihood of getting into Super Smash Bros., I would put Wonder Red somewhere on par with Isaac, since both picks are the main characters of niche Nintendo games that were both developed by second-party studios. So in the grand scheme of things, Wonder Red is the equivalent of a meme character that doesn't have the rabid fan base to turn him into a meme character. However, despite everything I've said, I will double down on Wonder Red getting into Super Smash Bros. Purely on the fact that he's an extremely obscure character pick that no one would expect. Because despite the fact that he doesn't deserve to get in, Wonder Red would be an amazing character to play as. In terms of moveset potential, Wonder Red is from a fucking Platinum game, alright? His moveset is already made. I mean, as far as his tilt attacks are concerned, all you have to do is give him his standard punches where he's by himself, but for his smash attacks and special abilities, you give him the Unite Morph variants. His down A smash attack can be the wonderful Cyclone, his down A air attack could be Unite Tombstone, the wonderful Stinger or Unite Spike Ball could both be his side B, the wonderful Rising or Unite Rocket or Unite Glider could all be his up B recovery, his down B could be Unite Spring as a Witch Time counterattack or a more offense-based attack with Unite Drill Spring variants, his default B could be Unite Guts, which could act as a projectile reflector and or possibly a counterattack with Unite Spikes, and the variations of different movesets you could make with Wonder Red are endless. Fucking endless! No matter what you end up going with, Wonder Red would have an incredibly fun moveset that would perfectly reflect his in-game abilities from the wonderful 101. Now, I've seen these dummies online who keep saying that you couldn't include Wonder Red because he'd have to be fighting alongside the Wonderful 100, but obviously if you're including his Unite Morph attacks, you're including the Wonderful 100 because that's how Wonder Red activates his Unite Morphs, you fucking dumbass geeks. So right off the bat, you could include all the different members of the Wonderful 100 inside all of his Unite Morph animations, and it would make perfect sense. Better yet, they could also add in the ability to hold the B button to use the Wonder Liner and allow Wonder Red to switch weapons in battle, which could also affect the properties of his smash attacks, the Wonderful Stinger, the Wonderful Cyclone, and the Wonderful Rising, while also including other members of the Wonderful 100. Oh my fucking god, you could draw a straight line with the Wonder Liner, and then oh shit, you're playing as Wonder Blue now, and now you've got Unite Sword, which would give you bigger hitboxes on your attacks but with less damage and knockback potential. And if you need some projectile attacks, you could draw the gun and switch to Wonder Green and use Unite Gun to weaken your opponents. And then you could include Wonder Pink, Wonder Yellow, Wonder White, and Wonder Black, and you could give each character unique smash attacks with different properties, a unique Wonderful Stinger, Cyclone, and Rising attack, which would allow representation of the entire main cast of the Wonderful 101 as a single character, and implement the on-the-fly weapon switching of the Wonderful 101. Like, oh my fucking god! Oh my god! And then guess what? With each palette swap, you could include entirely different groups of members from the Wonderful 100 and be able to include the entire fucking cast of the Wonderful 101 as alternate costumes. Like, holy fucking shit, it'd be so fucking cool! Now, Sakurai would never include the Wonder Liner because it'd be way too complicated and probably be fucking overpowered. But if they did, it would be exactly like you were playing the game. It would be amazing! Like I said before, there are infinite possibilities with Wonder Red's inclusion, and it will probably never happen. Still, the concept of having Wonder Red in Super Smash Bros. Is so fucking cool that I will put Wonder Red as my ultimate wildcard character pick that doesn't deserve to get in. In the grand scheme of things, if Wonder Red is ever included in the game, he'll probably get in on the technicality that he'll be an extremely surprising Nintendo character with a niche cult following. Now, there's still a ton of character picks I could talk about, but honestly, that's all I want. I think the Monster Hunter would be an objectively perfect outsider character pick, Banjo and Kazooie would be pretty fitting considering their history with Nintendo, and Wonder Red is probably my #1 favorite character pick that would never happen. I mean, I could continue talking about some trash characters that I don't really want, but I don't know, I'm pretty content with what we got. Everyone is here! Honestly, the fact that the character speculation has evolved to such D-tier trash characters is truly a testament to how fantastic the current roster is. I mean, there's always room for improvement, but unless Nintendo just keeps porting this game forward and adding in new characters, I don't know how they're gonna top the next game. Well, whatever the future holds, I'm pretty confident with whatever Sakurai decides to do. I mean, even if he decides to pick some of the dumb meme characters that I hate, I honestly wouldn't even care. Because that probably meant that Sakurai was able to come up with something interesting in spite of how horrible of a choice they were. And for the love of God, don't be fucking upset at me for pointing out that your favorite character pick is dumb. Because in the grand scheme of things, it's fucking dumb. Just because some of these characters would make horrible roster picks for Super Smash Bros., it doesn't mean that I hate the games they're from. It just means that they're bad choices. I mean, Jesus Christ, I fucking love Wonder Red from the Wonderful 101, but in the grand scheme of Super Smash Bros., he's not all that important. And if it never happens, then that's completely reasonable. I don't need to use Super Smash Bros. To validate my own opinion on the Wonderful 101 because the game is fucking amazing. And Wonder Red's inclusion in Smash isn't going to change that. So to all the people that are upset that I shit all over your favorite video game characters, I just want to know if you actually like Super Smash Bros. Or if you just like the game they're from. Because if you're genuinely upset that your favorite character isn't in Smash, you're mostly just being upset that people don't like your favorite game as much as you do, which is kind of pathetic. Anyways, I guess the point of this video is that everyone sucks dick at picking characters for Smash except for me. And if Sakurai doesn't add in my favorite characters for the DLC, I'm going to bully him on Twitter and call him a lazy piece of shit, despite the fact that he's delivered on one of the most impressive character rosters of all time. I'll then go to EVO and obnoxiously complain about players using overpowered characters, and instead of just learning the matchup and becoming a better player, I'll just lose the match and constantly boo other players throughout the entire tournament like a giant asshole, and make the entire Smash community look like a bunch of whiny children. Also, no, I won't take a shower because Melee is still the best game in the series, and then when Sakurai doesn't add in my incredibly niche character picks for the next Super Smash Bros. Game, I'm going to continue to bully Sakurai on social media for being such a lazy fuck, because I'm a die-hard Super Smash Bros. Fan who will never be happy because this shit character no one gives a fuck about isn't in the game. Except, oh wait, I still ended up buying the game at launch anyways, because I'm a giant, ungrateful, hypocrite, piece of shit who's just throwing temper tantrums on social media like a fucking child because I didn't get what I want. And to that I say, fuck you.